I am 42 standard years old, in my prime by imperial standards, young by those of the Inquisition. All my life, I have had a reputation for being cold, unfeeling. Some have called me heartless, ruthless, even cruel. I am not. I am not beyond emotional response and compassion, but I possess, and my masters count this as perhaps my paramount virtue, a singular force of will. Throughout my career, it has served me well to draw on this facility and steel myself, unflinching, at all that this wretched galaxy can throw at me. To feel pain or fear or grief is to allow myself a luxury I cannot afford. Dan Abnett has done it again, folks. He's pulled me back into loving Warhammer. Just when I thought McNeil had sucker punched me into disliking it, Abnett brought me back! And I'm also looking very goobery today. Enjoy my Eisenhorn painting in the background. Hee. The general shape of this review will be as follows, since my brain needs a little bit more structure in order to fully lay everything out. We're going to run through some things this book reminds me of, then we're going to quickly hit the two short stories that Dan Abnett recommended reading before this book, Pestilence and Regia Occulta, and then we'll hit the actual book itself by talking about Eisenhorn's relationship to three different spheres of power: social power, political power, and magical, read chaos, power. We'll touch on characters, a few scenes, some lines, but this review is going to be fairly fast and loose as it pertains to the contents of Xenos. It's not a spoiler-free review, but it's certainly not as in-depth in terms of the story as some of my other reviews have been. This different approach was not by choice, but rather because I can't shut up about my thoughts and feelings about Eisenhorn, often divorced from the actual story. So let's get started. The first show I'd like to point to, you've probably heard me talk about if you came by stream when I was talking about Eisenhorn, which you should come by the way. I talk about Warhammer and many other cool lore franchises on stream at twitch.tv/gremlinmay, and that show is Leverage. If you're unfamiliar with Leverage, you really only need to know that it's a show about heists. It ran for 5 perfectly paced seasons, and it ended exactly when it needed to. It is genuinely my favorite TV show of all time. I don't recommend it to everyone though, because it is a very goofy show. It's campy, it's silly, it's cliche, and it's perfect. The thing it does so well is something I saw the entire way through Eisenhorn. It knows what it is, and it delivers on that time and time again, without failure and without faltering. There is no episode of Leverage that I point to and say, yeah, that one was a little off. Some episodes are better than others, but all of them understand what their goal is, giving you an entertaining escape for like half an hour with a heist that has exactly 2 to 3 twists and turns, fun character banter, cool expertise from the characters, and an ending where the good guys win. This is, in my experience as an avid network TV watcher, extremely hard to do. I've seen modern shows falter in this regard, with Lucifer dropping the ball in its 6th season, as well as in older shows with White Collar often losing its identity as a serial show in favor of larger plots that failed to understand why White Collar was so good. The episodic nature of these shows, of the majority of network TV shows back then, is crucial to their narrative success. And while TV has moved away from this, there's a beauty I still find in older shows that have this in their DNA, as well as modern shows that work to emulate it. And here's Dan Abnett, delivering me a gorgeous 2006 book that reads like a 2006 network TV show, equipped with around 2 to 3 twists and turns, fun character banter, cool expertise from the characters, and an ending where the quote-unquote good guys win. Like Heresy, the idea of a good guy is very contextual, but in this series, Eisenhorn is our quote-unquote good guy. He's our hero through and through. He's not even anti-hero, he's just our hero in the way that he's framed. And boy do I like Eisenhorn. I think it's important to note, as one last thing, that this book exists in a universe composed of satire. And while Leverage campiness comes from its aim to be easy to digest, the campiness of Eisenhorn, his catsuit, his one-liner, his general aura of being a quote-unquote tough guy, all of it is in service to the satirical tint with which we have to view all of Warhammer 40k. Abnett does not make this book campy because camp is fun and often easy to digest. He does it because he is making fun of the Imperium, of its agents, of its goals, and the callous, uncaring way it achieves them. I want to point to another piece of media that gave me similar vibes, one of which is the modern The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I think pays homage to spy themes in such a fun and, again, campy way. It's a really cool movie, and the way that Abnett pays homage to detective and spy stories reminded me of it, albeit more toned down. Still, there are points where you can almost feel Eisenhorn turn to the camera, so to speak, to deliver some of his lines. I like to believe that this is intentional. This is the sort of story that, at least on its face, in the first book, etc., one could see taking root in the Imperium as a veneration of a bold, intense warrior within the Imperium, someone who fights for the good of mankind. He's a hero of the Imperium. And when I say that, you should scoff. You should laugh. You should understand that if this is what being a hero in the Imperium is, then the Imperium is a thing worthy of your scorn. There's something I'm reaching for here, this idea of pointing and laughing at men who puff out their chest and wear uniforms and believe that fear is the only way to rule. I can't quite articulate it, but if you get it, you really get it, I think. There's also elements of Golden Age science fiction in this book, but I think it would be remiss not to say that this is probably just Dan Abnett's influences showing through. I'm a huge fan of older science fiction, especially the stuff that reads more like fictionalized anthropology than anything else, and it's easy to see, in my opinion, that Dan Abnett likes that sort of writing too. There are classic character beats, ways of talking about technology, and an underlying humor that is just so Golden Age sci-fi that I can't really explain. It's a genre feeling, like making a drawing from rubbing a pencil on a rock. There's an imprint left. It warms my heart. I think the most fun part is that a lot of Golden Age sci-fi is so cliche and hokey at this point that if you don't enjoy the amount of inherent camp that they contain, they can be hard to read. And writers like Abnett are able to produce stories that pay beautiful homage to that era of writing while updating them in a lot of ways. Moving on to Pestilence. In Pestilence, an Imperial medicae, Lemuel Sark, investigates Ulrun's pox, a deadly disease, by going to someone who had suffered through it before and lived. The big twist of the story is that the pox was being spread by the doctor they were working with to cure it, with that doctor having been infected by chaos, in both instances. It is a really cool story. Abnett's pacing is incredible, and he has a real knack for setting this type of tone while keeping the tension at a bearable and impactful level for the entire story. When I look back on it in my mind, the asylum that Sark visits is covered in a dark haze, the scene a sickly green, the patients milling about while Sark peers into a dark cell searching for answers. It left a distinct impression on me. There is no direct connection to Eisenhorn Xenos that I can see, except that in one of the later chapters, when arguing with the other Inquisitors about whether or not Eisenhorn should have burned the Necrotech, Titus Endor says, "Tell me, do you actually need to contract Ulrun's pox yourself to know that it is fatal?" Although, I will say, it is a really great introduction into Dan Abnett's way of writing the Imperium. And now for a not-so-brief aside on Dan Abnett's satirical writing. It's very easy for me to see that in his 40k writing, Dan Abnett understands and loves the satire of the Imperium, and he wants you to understand and love it too. He wants you to revel in how vile and bureaucratic it is, to know on an innate level that these people are bad. Which is why we can have Eisenhorn, an arm of this awful Imperium, be our hero, and I never felt like he was, as an author, making Eisenhorn out to be anything other than what he was, an agent of an evil institution. And you may be like, wow, May, that's a little dramatic, but I believe that the point of the Imperium as a fictional institution is to show that in their effort to keep the idea of the Imperium of man going, they have forgone any actual effort to keep humanity alive and well. All that matters to the Imperium is the idea of itself, the same for the ecclesiarchy. That's where the satire is. That's where you go, man, these guys are stupid. But they aren't stupid. They just don't actually care about humanity. This sort of satire is so important because it shows that governments and systems are only as good as their actual function, not their purported function. You can say that the Imperium is there to preserve humanity all day long, but it's simply not true given how it actually works. The Imperium's job is to keep that lie alive while also keeping the structures of power in place. This is a Jenga tower of a governmental system, always on the verge of collapse, but its own weight, its own size, is the only thing that prevents it from actually failing on any large scale. Does Abnett make Eisenhorn into this guy who basically does gun fu and crawls up the sides of buildings and is a super spy? Yeah. But just out of frame, in your periphery, is the ecclesiarchy, the Ordo Xenos, the Imperium. All of it is casting this shadow that no matter how hard Eisenhorn works or how cool he is on any level, it is always in service of a group of really awful people in an awful world in an awful universe. The juxtaposition is what makes this book so interesting to me. You can enjoy and love Eisenhorn's story, but at the same time, you have to ask, who am I rooting for? Why does it matter? Can I only have the lesser of the evils? Are they even lesser? And those are questions you, as an individual reader, have to think critically about and answer for yourself. And wow, that is so nice to see in a book. I'm not going to answer those questions here directly or how I feel about them, although I'm pretty sure you can extrapolate the general idea of my answers given what I've talked about. I really do want people to read Eisenhorn and answer these questions for themselves without consulting anybody else. Is Eisenhorn a good guy in a bad system or a bad guy in a bad system? What makes someone a good guy? Can you be a good guy in a bad system at all? And then I want you to look at what other people say, ask questions, try to figure out the way that you feel. Think critically. This book is begging you to, and I am as well. I think these questions are not new, but they can extend well past the Warhammer universe into the real world, where you may ask questions like, can a system be changed from within? Are there any good politicians? Can a system be changed by good people if the system is bad? What's the actual function of a system? What does the system say it provides, and what does it actually provide? And these are not just like questions for people who live in the US or the UK. You live in a system with rotten parts, no matter where you are, and you should think critically about how those systems work and what people say they do and what they actually do. I'm not someone who likes to talk politics with strangers on the internet, but I do like reading and thinking critically about it, talking about it with peers and friends, and if Warhammer is the way you start thinking about those things and talking about them with your peers and friends, hell yeah. Abnett gives you a great jumping off point here. Answer those questions within the Warhammer world, and don't be afraid to start asking questions about your real world. Also, this isn't an invitation to talk about those real world questions in my comment section. I don't know you, you're not my friend, and I don't talk politics with random people on the internet. Save your energy, as I will just hide your comments if you do. If Warhammer got you to start thinking about real world politics though, I'd love to hear that, to know if my hypothesis that this is a type of gateway to doing that is correct, or if I'm simply being wishful. I don't particularly care if you have the same answers to those questions as I do, that's not important to me. What's important is that you've taken the time to answer those questions while being able to back up why you think the way you do about them. On to Regia Occulta. This was just a cool story. It was neat. It has a lot of action. It showed a young Eisenhorn. There was an orc. Great story. I do really enjoy the fact that this book opened with a short story, as it eased me into Eisenhorn's narrative voice and his character without introducing me to a huge plotline. It felt like a solid half-hour episode of a TV show that I would definitely keep watching. We do get to see Abnett's incredible characterization and his ability to do so quickly in one of the first paragraphs of Regia Occulta that I'd like to share with you. If for some reason you're watching this review without knowing who Eisenhorn is, weird, this will give you a good idea. The rosette, or title Inquisitor, or a combination of both, fairly focused the minds of those who met me. This attitude bores me these days. Back then, it gave me a sort of vulgar sensation of power. We immediately understand who Eisenhorn was and is, with his past self being someone concerned with the outward appearance of power, and his future self, I suspect given the snippet, being someone concerned with the inner sensation of power, kind of like external versus internal validation, but with power, to be perceived as powerful rather than being powerful. Eisenhorn, I believe, will continue to be positioned in relation to power, the power he has socially, politically, and magically, as I mentioned. These are all things I want to keep an eye on as I move through the series because, unlike the character he is often compared to, James Bond, Eisenhorn cares about power. Another brief aside, is Eisenhorn the 40k James Bond? Stay tuned. I think that the action within Xenos leans very early Bond, say From Russia with Love or Dr. No. It's, oh, there's that word again, campy, over the top, kind of fun. But Eisenhorn himself only resembles Bond from an onlooker's perspective, not a reader's perspective. I haven't read any of the Bond books, which is honestly an oversight on my part, just given my interest in spy books, but if he operates at all like any other spy man in a spy book, he doesn't have a lot of internality in terms of thoughts and feelings beyond snarky remarks. My best touchstone is Lacar's Alex Lamas, who, if memory serves, was more of a blank slate of a man than someone with an intense voice. Like most spies, he is a tabula rasa on which his agency can paint whatever is needed. Same for the author. I think that this deviation from Bond is a boon for Eisenhorn, as Abnett's way of crafting his voice, whether it be past or present, is captivating. You're drawn into this narrative because Eisenhorn is good at telling it. He knows what the important parts are because he remembers them. I believe Eisenhorn simply would not work in third person. Also, I realized while writing this that it's honestly more fun to talk about and think about Eisenhorn almost as a whole, as an entity, as a guy, as a character, than it is to talk about the story itself. I don't know how to fully explain it, but I think it goes to show how fleshed out Eisenhorn is that I continue to go on tangents about him without having to talk about story beats, simply because he is so fleshed out in my head as a dude. He's such a specific type of man, and I really love his characterization. So let's talk about him. I literally will not shut up about Eisenhorn. I'm having such a fun time picking apart this guy and thinking about what he's gonna do. I keep wanting to point to every single one of his decisions and be like, look at that, it's genius. It's so good, look at what Abnett did, it's great, ah! It reminds me a lot of when I played my first indie tabletop role-playing game, The King is Dead by Megan Baker with Meg Baker herself and a bunch of other really talented role players at a convention a few years back. I couldn't stop thinking about rhetorical positioning and how interesting it is to maneuver within conversations, and I basically weaponized my autism, or rather the years of masking that I'd done, in order to think about role-playing games and the characters within them. Eisenhorn is a finely crafted character, and I keep imagining how clever it would feel to play him, and that I'm realizing now is why I love this book, and I'm so obsessed with Eisenhorn. He is consistently clever, time and time again. The stuff he does just feels good when you hear about it. He gets into a bind, no problem. He's Eisenhorn. He's gonna be clever about it. As a TTRPG designer and player, I want at the end of the day for everyone to leave the table feeling they have been clever. You want players to get into scrapes and scraps and feel like they've pulled themselves out of that with their own wits and smarts. And Eisenhorn is such a great example of that happening. Does he get saved a few times? Of course, but that's because the other players at the table are also really clever. I keep coming back to leverage as a comparison because I feel the same way about the show. It's talented people being clever, and I'm starting to feel like my life revolves around this concept, and I'm not mad about it, but girly, get some other hobbies, like... I'm also making my way through the book for this review, and I keep finding really goofy things, like when Eisenhorn is talking to Fishig about iClone, and Fishig says, "You know the details of his naked flesh?" And Eisenhorn replies, "I have sources," I replied. "I didn't want to have to tell the tale. Amanda, one of my first companions, brilliant, beautiful, and bold, she had found that detail out for me. She'd been in an asylum now for 5 years. The last report I received, she said she had eaten away her own fingers." Like, excuse me, is this a comedy book? Funny book comedy? I didn't write this into the script, but it reminds me a lot of, I don't know if any of y'all have ever watched Chuck, which is another network TV show. But it sounds like something that Casey would say to Chuck in order to kind of scare him, like spook him a little bit. It's just like, I don't know, it's so self-serious. But I'm kind of in love with lines like this, and they are scattered throughout. The most famous, I think, being the line about how his patience, unlike his authority, is not unlimited. Abnett just understands and knows how to communicate Eisenhorn's inherent cockiness in such a fun and interesting way. Now, don't get me wrong, like, there's like a bit of the cockiness it's earned, but also I think Abnett like wants you to understand how goofy Eisenhorn's self-seriousness is. I want to truly introduce you to the idea of power as it relates to Eisenhorn, who I can tell is on a trajectory to touch power. He's going to reach out his hand toward power, expecting to control it, and he will find that it, whether he likes it or not, controls him more than he wants. This is the best arc I can see for him. I don't know if Eisenhorn will talk about it or admit it, but taking on power, accepting power, is, in and of itself, taking on a new part of who you are, and you are changed because of it. There is no world in which you can take on power of any kind and remain unchanged, and I'm really looking forward to Eisenhorn's monologue where he internally justifies why taking power isn't as bad as he thinks it's going to be. I think I didn't expand on this in the script because I was scared of taking up too much space, but I'm not afraid actually anymore. I want to talk just kind of off the cuff a little bit about what I mean in this. I'm envisioning that Eisenhorn is going to be like, nah, it's not going to change me. Bro, I'm built different. Like, I'm still going to be able to uphold all my ideals and goals, and I'm still going to be able to be the Inquisitor that I've always been, and I want him to have this intense, stark realization at some point that he has Ship of Theseus himself. He can no longer call himself the Inquisitor that he once was. And it's really interesting that you know while he's narrating this book, Eisenhorn is in the future. He is already that guy, and he is looking back on the ship before the parts begin to be replaced. Basically what I want to say. I'm truly going to relish when he accepts power, when he takes on whatever dark force has tempted him, when he gives in. Ooh, baby, I'm gonna be eating good. Let's talk about social power. One of the things that I think makes Eisenhorn so frightening as a dude to me, which by the way, I find him very scary, I don't think I've mentioned that, is because he is by and large extremely good with people. I think Eisenhorn in Regia Occulta needed to get better with people, and by Xenos he had. He understands the power he wields socially and politically, and he is not afraid to maneuver with it. Not just use it, as we see with other Inquisitors later on, but maneuver with it. He dances with his power, he does not plod. He is also generally just good at talking to people. He understands how egos work, how important small politics are, how you have to think about people's emotions or whatever. His scenes with Betancourt at the beginning of the book especially are really great at showing that Eisenhorn is a born leader. Frightening thing alert! And he is really good at rallying those who are with him. We see him do this later on when he handpicks the Navy guards to go hunt the Necrotech the second time. We see him do this with Fischig, Bequin, etc. He is just a good leader, a good speaker, a seemingly good guy. I also really enjoyed Tobias, the rogue trader they became friends with, ? Does Eisenhorn have friends? Does he allow himself the luxury of friendship? The jury is still out. The little touches we get, like the fact that Tobias's crew has literally 0 fully sentient humans on it and that he himself is half machine, is so delicious. That didn't need to be included, but it makes the interactions so interesting. Eisenhorn's conversations with Tobias too are a really wonderful look into how Eisenhorn thinks about social power, and this is a great moment for me to say why I wanted to talk about Eisenhorn in this structure, because I believe that Dan has written it in this way deliberately because Eisenhorn is someone who actively thinks about it. He doesn't use the same terms as me, but he is always considering his relationship to power when making decisions and talking to people. Also, I just realized that Eisenhorn is such a good book on which to structure your tabletop role-playing games in so many ways, because the downtime beats that happen in Eisenhorn are just so interesting and cool, and they flesh out the characters, and you get to hang out with them and learn more about them. Eisenhorn's so good. I'm never gonna shut up about this book, dude. Take, for instance, the relationship that Eisenhorn has with Tobias. We're jumping back to the power discussion. When it starts, Eisenhorn is wary of Tobias because Eisenhorn has more power in this situation, even if Tobias is the one with something that Eisenhorn needs. As an Inquisitor, he can take what he needs from others, but Eisenhorn sees that that's not always the best thing to do, and he's always bobbing and weaving in ways of politeness and bluntness. It's a constant dance he's doing. And we get to see some of that internally too. His conversations with Tobias read like he's playing a social script, as if Eisenhorn is running a sort of social diagnostics checklist where he's asking, okay, cui bono, who benefits, who gains, what could they leverage here, what can I leverage here? How do I move within this conversation without having to create more hassle for myself? I'll talk more about this scene later, but when Eisenhorn passes that dying woman in the hibernation chambers, he's justified leaving her because not doing so would be a hassle for him. And he's polite to Tobias, lets things kind of shake out between them because not doing so might cause a hassle for him. He takes Fischig on with him because not doing so might cause a hassle for him. He is constantly trying to avoid the bureaucracy and small politics around him, and doing so, literally just being a guy who gets the job done, has in and of itself become a way of moving socially and politically, and there's so many layers. I just need you to understand there's so many layers, and everything he does has so many ramifications, and it's crazy. This book is just so good. If you haven't read it, go read it. If you've read it, go read it again. Go think about it some more. You didn't think hard enough about Eisenhorn. No one's thought hard enough about Eisenhorn. They probably have. I just haven't listened to their book review yet. Let's talk about how Eisenhorn thinks and uses his political power, aka his power in relation to the Inquisition. There's definitely overlap with social power here, but we won't worry too much about when that bleeds over. I'll just say that it usually involves the Inquisition, which is kind of my catch-all term for all other Inquisitors and those who serve the Inquisition, including the Xeno Ordos. Then it's political power. Eisenhorn identifies himself as a Puritan by calling an Amalathian by choice. Amalathians believe that the God Emperor has a plan, they hate factions and infighting, and they believe most of all in strength and unity. As far as I can tell, this isn't a huge part of who Eisenhorn is. I think him being a Puritan is much more important, but I could see his ties to this faction becoming important later on. He has another banger line that is just so painfully foreshadowing something that I enjoyed the slap in the face it gave me. Radicals believe that any methods are allowable if they accomplish the inquisitorial task. I have heard the arguments often enough. They appall me. Radical belief is heretical. I also really love that Abnett has Eisenhorn describe himself, and it really shows you the ego on this guy, and it's great. Eisenhorn says at the end of chapter 1, "So you have me then pictured, Gregor Eisenhorn, Inquisitor, Puritan, Amalathian, 42 years old, standard, and Inquisitor for the past 18 years. I am tall and broad at the shoulders, strong, resolute. I have already told you of my force of will, and you will have noted my prowess with a blade." Dude, while you were talking to women, Eisenhorn was studying the blade. It's so hard not to love this guy in such a weird way. He's become one of my little guys that I love and also hate, and that I want to pat on the forehead and say, "Good job, buddy. I'm so proud of you. Look at you fighting off all that chaos." And I know that would infuriate him, and that makes me so happy. He's just a dumb guy in so many ways, while also being very smart, very capable, very dangerous. He's silly. A lot of people have recommended the Sci-Fi Kane series to me, and I have heard him called the Emperor's silliest clown. Well, he's got at least 2 clowns, because get a load of this guy, am I right? Eisenhorn's a hoot. We get another wonderful look into Eisenhorn's thought process about his role as Inquisitor as he leaves a woman dying instead of killing her out of mercy, in order to chase after iClone. "Do you think me weak, flawed? Do you hate me for setting my inquisitorial role above the needs of one agonized being? If you do, I commend you. But if you hate me, I know this about you. You are no Inquisitor. You don't have the moral strength. Princess, you just wouldn't understand how hard it is being a Discord mod. You don't understand what it's like." There's something so self-serious about this that I kind of missed on my first read through. I thought it was tough the first time, but if you dig down, you see that he's justifying here. The reason he left that woman there is because of the paperwork, because of that hassle. When I know he probably knows like 5 ways to kill someone without leaving a trace, I just want to point to this line and yell, "Please don't take this man seriously. There's something really weird about it when you look closer at the stuff he says." And I can't spend forever just analyzing this one line, or this review will be 4 hours long, but there's an energy here that we'll see again and again. The self-assurance that his mission is above all else. It's so serious and so important that many must suffer for it to continue. He goes on, "Mankind must suffer so that mankind can survive." And this is the great lie that the Imperium sells, right? This is the lie that Eisenhorn sells too. This is what his coolness is in service of. It's often very much the same way for other action heroes, and I know it gets addressed in later superhero media, but if you just think about how much property damage, injuries, and accidental death that superheroes have caused in their fiction, well, that's the same lie. Except the Imperium gives you no room to contemplate that maybe, just maybe, there are better ways to do this, or better systems that would help prevent these problems. And if you dare say, "Oh yeah, May, how would you fix the Imperium?" you're missing the point. You're being obtuse and weird. The whole point of this fictional empire is that it's the worst of all possible worlds, and Wittgenstein is rolling in his grave. Oh, leave me alone. Go read Eisenhorn again. I need to take a minute to highlight how important the move of handpicking the folks who go to the weird planet in a planet with him is. I mentioned this in passing in the social section to show how good he is with people in general, but it's actually mostly a political move. The move has so much weight, not just for those he chooses, which Abnett notes, saying they were much more confident because they had been handpicked, but it also says something politically to those in the Imperium. Eisenhorn is maneuvering, there's that word again, his power as an inquisitor within the structure of inquisitorial politics. This is really getting into my territory now in terms of storytelling. I love what one might classify as quote-unquote small politics, and here we see Eisenhorn engage in it in subtle but powerful ways. In the Horus Heresy books, especially the first one, I noted that Horus, as well as some of the Primarchs, show very good political positioning, but Eisenhorn's abilities in that realm are shown much more often. since he is not the quote-unquote top dog, so to speak, within the structure he inhabits. This move of handpicking the troops works to reinforce the earlier assertion he made. If this had been a book more concerned with small politics, I could absolutely see Abnett writing in a scene where Eisenhorn gets challenged harder on his knowledge of the Xenos when he says they must change the training regiment, and his triumph in the world being just as weird and off-putting as it was would be even greater because of the positioning. Am I just saying a lot of words, or is this getting across? I'm not saying he's a political genius, but Abnett positions him always in relation to his power. As I've said time and time again, each of his choices, no matter how small, has ramifications within the world he lives in, and that is so powerful for the storytelling here, and it's achievable because of the power-drenched world Eisenhorn lives in. I need you to understand that this is literally my favorite type of setting. I would kill to roleplay something in this book. The social, emotional, and political awareness and positioning you must have at every moment would be so gloriously overwhelming. The rhetorical jousting you could do? Off the charts. Chef's kiss. Oh, May, it's not that deep. It is, shut up. I want it to be. There's a reason the curtains are blue in this book. No one's thinking hard enough about Eisenhorn! So let's move on to the last category, the magical/warp/chaos power. The chaos in this book is really cool. Love that we get to see a corrupted Emperor's Children baddie in the form of Mandragore, and it's great to have multiple human perspectives on what it's like to see a corrupted Astartes. Beckwin's reaction to him, one of visceral, intense fear, how you know that she just sat there, frozen, being sucked in, the whispers of Slaanesh in her ear as her vision blurred, and suddenly she was bolting, running, hiding out of pure instinct, some part of her body telling her to run. Oh, it's so good. Actually, having written that out, I wonder if instead it was quiet, like a crushing pressure on her skull until she bolted, since the warp can't affect her that much. I'm fascinated by her. I love Beckwin. After enduring the way that McNeill wrote women within Fulgrim, this is a breath of fresh air. And I really relate to Beckwin too, like a lot. I know that being a blank is probably a lot worse, but there is a phenomena I've heard about where some neurotypical folks can basically feel that you're autistic and they will adjust how they react to you accordingly. I don't know if this is like true. I can't find the study or the source, but I will say from lived experience, people have treated me differently as someone who is autistic because I have a very different vibe. I tend to gravitate toward other neurodivergent people for this reason, and I can't imagine being in Beckwin's situation where she is alone in that, and having someone treat her differently for something that isn't her fault. Plus, she can't, like, mask it. She's just always gonna be that way. There's no way to hide it. That's terrifying. The ending line in the scene where Eisenhorn breaks the news to her that she gives everyone around her the ick, he says, "I believe that she had always stoically blamed the galaxy as a whole for her troubles. Now I'd as good as kick that emotional crutch away." And this was probably the only line in the book I didn't get. And you, my beautiful Warhammer nerds, get a chance to interpret this line for me and tell me what the heck Dan Abnett meant here. Was he saying that she blamed everyone else? Why is she now blaming herself for something that isn't her fault? Why is blame coming into this at all? Is Eisenhorn just a little silly goofy with it here and doesn't know how to process an emotion that doesn't have to do with his inquisitorial quest? Get those answers down in the comments below. Throne bless. But even though that line confuses me, I love this scene. My sticky note on it literally says, "This scene is really interesting." It shows how Eisenhorn is just doing his duty, but he does have a very human eye towards things. If you've been reading 30k like I have, is a welcome relief to the Astartes attempting to reach the once human part of themselves by peeling back the layers of chemicals and muscles. It usually doesn't go well for our ragged space marines. For Eisenhorn, you see it's something he actively thinks about and takes into account. He, for all of his scariness and awfulness and otherwise, is a considerate guy. And that's how they get ya. I think this would be a great time and place to talk about the aliens in this book. Dude, the aliens are so sick and cool. I'm like, whoa, dude, they're crazy. Like, I cannot get over how Abnett describes these little dudes. The idea of geometry just not adding up is so brain melting, and I'm so glad I don't have to look at those things in real life. I know there's probably some semi-equivalent optical illusion thing you could show me, but something actually defying the laws of geometry like that, mind-boggling. The warp is crazy. We don't get too much about what the necrotech does in this book, except, I don't know, let you bend space and time, possibly? This is kind of my first real foray into science fiction that has magic in it. I've done some science fiction with some magical realism, but I am weirdly usually a hard sci-fi girly. In the past, I've really enjoyed how grounded hard sci-fi is, but now that I'm reading space magic books, my eyes have been opened. There is so much more about the warp that I am excited to learn. It's one of those ideas that is so ripe with potential that it makes me giddy. Abnett describing the TARDIS-like planet they go to alone has me vibrating with joy. The scene where they are walking the vast, endless beach with weird geometry and the giant arches is vivid, rich, inviting. It wants you to imagine this messed up world and walk that beach with them, and I feel I did. Trekking to meet the stolen Navy ships and the aliens carrying ancient tomes of forbidden knowledge. The setup makes me feel so full inside, an epic tale contained in this giant space inside the belly of a dying planet. It feels like magic in itself to get to experience writing that is so alive with spirit and the love of the setting. As much as Abnett leans into the satire of the series, it is plain and evident that he thinks of space, of science fiction, as a true love. Every line is crafted, created, and cradled with such care. Damn. Crying in the club about how Dan Abnett describes these little aliens and their fucked up geometry is crazy. But absolutely valid. Also, like, what's up with that shareable guy? Kind of wild if you ask me. I don't really know. I don't have anything to say about him. He was just kind of in the book. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff I didn't talk about in this book review. This book's big. There's a lot of stuff going on in it. I didn't really care about the Glaws or whatever their name. I don't even remember their name. I don't really care. I just care about like Eisenhorn and his crew. Like, you don't need to remember the villains. You just need to remember like how cool and sick and like neato the heroes were. Anyway, follow me on Twitch. Hope you like this book review. Hope you like my little mini painting. We're gonna be reading the next Eisenhorn book. That's gonna come out literally the week after this, provided everything goes according to plan. It almost never does, but I'm really praying I don't have to record another section where I'm like, tee-hee, just kidding. Tee-hee. I decided to quit nicotine, and I am now fist fighting depression with my bare hands, and it's hard. So I'm releasing this one early because I just can't promise when the next one's gonna come, because nothing really ever works out as I planned it to. But it's okay. This is really important to me, and I'm doing something really hard, but I'm very proud of myself. I'm still streaming. You can come hang out with me. But I will say my energy is a little bit lower than normal. So anyway, I am reading Malleus right now, and I'm enjoying it. It's definitely a lot slower of a book, but I'm excited to get into it. I don't know what I'll be painting, but I'll figure it out. Thanks. Twitch.tv/GremlinMay. Make sure you like and subscribe this video. If you have any hype points, it would warm my little gremlin heart if you use them on me. It would be so sweet and kind of you. Like I said, I'm a full-time content creator. I put my whole heart and soul into all this stuff, and I love it. It's like my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And it makes me really happy to see you guys' comments. I don't get notifications about them anymore because it was doing a little bit of brain rot, but I do my best to check as many as I can. Thank you so much for all the support on these. I would probably still be reading some Warhammer stuff, but I don't think I'd be doing it with the joy and intensity that I do, and that's because of you guys. Thank you so much, dude. Really, really. Alright, I'll see you in the next book review. Adios, Scoobers! Shout out to Strawberry Possum, who gave me a lot of feedback on parts of the script. Kind of hate that guy, but, you know,